The coastal town of Varnholt clung to the edge of the world, its crooked streets and salt-eaten houses nestled between jagged cliffs and a restless sea. For generations, its people had lived in quiet communion with the ocean's moods, their faces weathered by wind and their stories steeped in whispers of things older than memory. On this particular dawn, however, the air carried a weight beyond the usual brine, a stillness that prickled the skin and silenced the gulls. Old Man Harrow, a fisherman whose hands bore the scars of a lifetime at sea, was the first to stumble upon the anomaly. Dragging his nets along the pebbled shore, he found a peculiar object half buried in the sand, a slab of obsidian-like stone, no larger than a book, etched with symbols that seemed to writhe under his gaze. He knelt to inspect it, his breath catching as a sharp pain seized his chest. Harrow clutched his throat, gasping, but the air refused him. His eyes bulged, his body convulsed, and he collapsed, dead before the waves could claim him. The artifact lay beside him, untouched, as the tide crept closer. By noon, Varnholt was a town undone. Men and women fell in the streets, their hands clawing at invisible nooses. A child crumpled in her mother's arms. A dog whined and stilled. In an alley, and even the fish in the market stalls gasped in their buckets, as if the very essence of life had turned traitor. No smoke clouded the air, no poison stained the water, only a void where breath should have been. Panic spread like wildfire, screams cut short by choking silence. As the sun dipped low, a moon rose, vast and unnatural, its surface a deep, pulsating crimson. It hung over the sea like a bleeding wound, casting a scarlet glow that painted the cliffs and rooftops in hues of dread. Fishermen who dared glance at it spoke of a sensation and awareness, as if the moon itself watched them, hungry and patient. Whispers of omen circulated, and the town's elders, those few still drawing breath, barricaded themselves in their homes, muttering prayers to gods long forgotten. The government, distant and faceless, acted swiftly. By nightfall, Varnholt was sealed off, declared a quarantine zone. Armored vehicles blocked the single road out, and helicopters droned overhead, their searchlights swallowed by the encroaching dark. The surviving townsfolk, barely 100, were herded to the old fortress atop the cliff, a relic of some forgotten war. Its stone walls, pitted by centuries of storms, housed makeshift chambers of steel and glass, sealed against the treacherous air. Inside, survivors huddled, their breaths shallow, their eyes darting to the windows where the red moon loomed. Among them were Dr. Elias Crane, a pragmatic physician who clung to science despite the inexplicable. Father Morrow, a gaunt priest, whose faith wavered under the moon's gaze. And Eliza and Tom Carver, a young couple expecting their first child, their hands clasped in desperate hope. Others, too, filled the chambers. A school teacher, a baker, a widow with hollow eyes. Each carried their own terror, their own questions, but none spoke above a whisper, as if sound might invite the unseen killer within. Crane busied himself with tests, analyzing air samples with scavenged equipment, his brow furrowed as every result defied logic. "There's no toxin, no pathogen," he muttered, his voice cracking. "It's as if the oxygen itself is absent." Father Morrow, clutching a worn Bible, knelt in a corner, his lips moving in fervent prayer. "This is judgment," he intoned, though his eyes betrayed doubt. "The Lord tests us, or something older stirs." Eliza, her hand on her swollen belly, pleaded with Crane for answers, her voice trembling. "Will my baby breathe? Will we?" As midnight crept closer, the fortress grew restless. Strange sounds echoed from beyond the sealed doors, low, guttural hums, like the sea itself groaning in pain. Susurrants, wordless and cold, seemed to seep through the walls, curling around the survivors' ears. In one chamber, a man pressed, his face to the glass, staring into the night. "It's out there," he whispered, his breath fogging the pain. "It knows we're here." The quarantine had begun, but Varnholt was no longer merely a town. It was a cage, and the air itself was its keeper. Within the sealed chambers of Varnholt's ancient fortress, the survivors clung to fragile routines to stave off despair. Dr. Elias Crane distributed water and meager rations, his hands steady despite the tremor in his voice. Father Morrow led a halting prayer, though few joined him, their eyes fixed on the crimson moon glaring through the reinforced glass. Eliza and Tom Carver sat close, her head on his shoulder, whispering assurances about their unborn child. Yet the air within the chambers felt heavier with each passing hour, as if the walls themselves resented their presence. The first sign of something new came from a child, little Mara, barely 7, who pointed at a window and screamed. "Eyes!" she cried, her voice piercing the uneasy quiet. Heads turned, hearts raced, and there, beyond the glass, a dense mist had gathered a gray veil that churned against the wind, unnatural and deliberate. Within it, faint but unmistakable, were glints of light, like stars in a storm, blinking. In and out, they were eyes, countless and unblinking, hovering in the mist with a predatory patience. The adults froze, some clutching each other, others backing away, as if distance could shield them from that gaze. Crane, ever the skeptic, approached the window, his breath fogging the glass. "It's a trick of the light," he said, though. His voice faltered, but the eyes did not vanish. They multiplied, their glow sharpening, and several survivors swore they saw them shift, tracking their movements. Tom pulled Eliza closer, shielding her from the sight. "They're watching us," he whispered. Father Morrow clutched his cross, muttering, "Not of God, not of God." Desperate for contact with the outside world, a group of men tried the fortress's old radio, a bulky relic in a corner. Static roared, then silence, then more static nothing reached beyond the cliffs. Phones were dead, screens blank, as if Varnholt had been severed from reality itself. The isolation pressed harder, a weight as tangible as the mist outside. One man, a baker named Hollis, slammed his fist against the wall. "We're trapped, and they're just waiting." The artifact Harrow had found on the beach, now in Crane's possession, drew his attention. Its obsidian surface seemed to drink the red moonlight, its etched symbols pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Crane sketched them in a notebook, his hands shaking. "These aren't random," he murmured. "They're a language or something else." He showed them to Father Morrow, who paled. "I've seen such marks," the priest said, "in the oldest stones of the church, hidden where no one looks." Morrow led Crane and a few others to the fortress's upper level, where faded tapestries hung over cracked walls. Behind one, he revealed carving symbols matching those on the artifact, accompanied by scrawled warnings in Latin. "They speak of a calamity," Morrow translated, his voice low. "A hunger in the air, bound long ago, but never destroyed." The group exchanged glances, the weight of centuries pressing down Dot in the fortress's dank basement. Tom and another survivor, a schoolteacher named Clara, found a forgotten storage room. Amid rusted tools and mildewed crates, they uncovered an ancient radio, its dials caked with dust. Against all odds, it hummed to life when Clara turned a knob. Static crackled, then a voice faint, panicked, from some unknown time. "Brath'zul is not a being," it rasped. "It is the air, alive, hungry for lungs. The red moon wakes it. We sealed ourselves, but it finds us still." A scream followed, then silence. Tom and Clara stared at the radio, their breaths shallow, as if the air itself might hear them. Back in the main chamber, the survivors gathered to hear the recording, replayed on the basement radio. Gasps filled the room, and Mara clung to her mother, sobbing, Crane's face drained of color. "The oxygen itself?" he whispered, his scientific mind reeling. Father Morrow crossed himself, muttering prayers. Eliza gripped Tom's hand, her voice breaking. "What does it want with us?" As night deepened, the mist thickened, pressing against the windows like a living thing. The eyes within it glowed brighter, and some swore they saw them inside. The chambers, flickering in shadows or reflected in glass. Worse still, a heaviness grew in their chests, each breath a labor. The air, their last refuge, was turning against them, and Brath'zul was closer than they feared. The fortress of Varnholt, once a bastion against storms, now felt like a tomb. The survivors, their faces gaunt under the crimson glow of the moon, gathered in the main chamber, the chilling radio message about Brath'zul echoing in their minds. Dr. Elias Crane paced, his notebook filled with sketches of the artifact's symbols, while Father Morrow clutched the ancient Latin warnings, his lips moving in silent prayer. Eliza and Tom Carver held each other, their hope for their unborn child a fragile shield against despair. The mist outside pressed against the sealed windows, its eyes now a constellation of malevolent glints, watching without relent. Crane, driven by a desperate need for answers, proposed a plan. "If the air itself is compromised, we need filtration," he said, pointing to scavenged pipes and canisters in the fortress's storeroom. With Tom and Clara, the schoolteacher, he rigged a crude system, pumping air through layers of charcoal. And cloth. "It's not perfect," Crane admitted, "but it might buy us time." The survivors watched, their breaths shallow, as the contraction hissed to life, offering a thin promise of safety. Father Morrow, poring over the fortress's carvings, found a passage describing a ritual to banish the hunger in the air. It required the artifact as a focal point, inscribed with blood and spoken words older than the cliffs. "This is our only hope," he urged, his voice trembling. Eliza, her hand on her belly, volunteered to assist, her eyes fierce. "For my child," she said. Tom nodded, refusing to let her face it alone. The others, torn between fear and desperation, agreed to try. A small group, led by Hollis the baker, rejected the ritual. "We're sitting ducks here," he shouted, rallying a handful to flee through the fortress's subterranean tunnels. They pried open a rusted hatch, descending into damp darkness. Minutes later, screams echoed upward, raw and brief, followed by silence. The mist had found them, its eyes glowing in the tunnel's depths. Those who remained shuddered, knowing escape was a lie. The air in the chambers grew thinner, each breath a struggle. Crane checked his filtration system, his heart sinking as gauges faltered. "It's not enough," he whispered, realizing the air itself resisted purification. Shadows seemed to pulse in the corners, and Mara, the child, whimpered, pointing at her own reflection. "The eyes are here," she sobbed. As if Brath'zul had slipped inside their sanctuary, Dot Morrow prepared the ritual in the fortress's highest chamber, where the red moon's light burned brightest. The artifact was placed on a stone table, surrounded by candles flickering against the mist's pressure. Eliza and Tom stood beside Morrow, their hands joined, as he chanted words that twisted the tongue syllables that seemed to writhe like the symbols. The artifact glowed, its surface rippling, and the mist outside roared, slamming against the windows with a force that cracked the glass. The eyes in the mist multiplied, a swarm of radiant malice, now seeping through the fissures in the walls. Survivors screamed, some collapsing as their lungs burned, as if Brath'zul fed directly from them. Crane, monitoring the filtration, saw the system fail entirely, charcoal crumbling to dust. "It's inside us," he gasped, clutching his chest, his vision blurring with glowing specks. The ritual reached its climax, Morrow's voice rising in defiance. Eliza trembling, pricked her finger, letting blood drip onto the artifact. The symbols flared, and for a moment, the mist recoiled. But the reprieve was fleeting. The windows shattered, glass raining inward, and the mist surged, a tide of gray studded with eyes. Tom shielded Eliza, his cry lost in the chaos as Morrow's chant faltered, his body slumping, breathless. The chambers buckled, walls groaning under the mist's weight. The survivors, their lungs searing, faced the truth. Brath'zul was not a foe to outwit or banish. It was the air, the essence of life turned predator. As the fortress crumbled, the eyes closed in, and the red moon pulsed, a silent witness to Varnholt's end. Whether any survived, or what became of Eliza's child, was swallowed by the mist, a secret held by Brath'zul's endless hunger.